Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the Conception Channel. I'm Spence Pentland. Today we're going to go through Healthy Sperm 101, Yinstill, and in my private practice, Healthy Sperm Treatment Plan. This is our generic 101 for all men that come through the clinic. Things that can be done to help improve overall health, but more importantly, sperm quality. But maybe even more importantly, in my eyes, we want to create healthy dads. So playing the long game. So anyway, we started with acupuncture. So we recommend as a start 12 weekly sessions, 3 months, one per week as a initial course. This is the foundation of our treatments for male factor infertility. So consistency, though, is key. And that's something that is really important to note. And there's plenty of research on acupuncture helping with sperm, and if you want more information, we will put notes or links to that in the show notes. Supplements, the basics. Take the following at least 3 months. Most research done on male infertility and supplements are done in 3 at least, often 6 months or phases of time, so to find effect. We developed a supplement called Abundance. It's Yinstill custom formulation to help optimize sperm quality and sexual function. We also recommend omega-3 fish oils, higher in EPA. This is referencing Nordic Naturals, but there's others out there. Important in the building and maintenance of sperm membranes, any cell membrane for that matter. Also reduces inflammation and oxidative stress, which is important when working with maintaining or improving sperm health. Another supplement, nicotinamide riboside, or NR. It's a precursor to NAD, or nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, which is involved in DNA protection and repair. Sperm DNA damage can be, or fragmentation is a cause of male factor infertility and potentially connected to miscarriage. And of course, a multivitamin. This is just to cover your essential nutritional bases. And there are others that we go into with men, but this is just in general things to take, and individual cases are assessed further from there. Glutathione injections are something we recommend to almost every man. It's our master antioxidant, very powerful for the protection of sperm in every cell, of course, but in particular has shown good effect through research with sperm, protecting it through its journey from testicles to ejaculation to fertilization of the egg. They're usually done in injections because glutathione is very poorly absorbed orally. It has to be broken down into its 3 amino acids. It's a tripeptide and then rebuilt. So typically we are injecting or IV at our clinics. It's virtually painless, and it's a good way to get a great dosage in. There's lots of research that has shown, semen low in glutathione, showing poor parameters, etc. I put links to these in the notes as well. And I've got another podcast video slideshow that is if you want more information on glutathione, it does a deep dive. Physical activity for men in particular, we recommend lifting heavy weights, lifting heavy things, low rep, high weight sets, best for producing testosterone and hence sperm. So large muscle groups like, chest for bench press or squats or deadlifts, for the back, pull-ups are all really great. There is some evidence pointing toward a lot of just a lot of chronic cardiovascular exercise, marathoning, etc. can be detrimental to testosterone levels and potentially to fertility then as well. So we just recommend walking. I put on a weighted vest. I've got a 25-pound vest. I go with that. Doing hills, etc. You get a bit more of a workout, but we want to keep more aerobic. Aerobic activity is key, to a healthy body. We were born to walk, and therefore healthy sperm as well as sexual function. Just you get out, you get fresh air, you also sleep better, and et cetera, et cetera. 4 days a week should be an easy goal. Get out, connect with your neighbors, connect to nature, get some fresh air, and vitamin D. Start that today. Testicle Care is another place that we want to look at. Some basics, keeping them cool. Heat is the number one enemy of our sperm. So, our scrotum is outside of our body for a reason. It keeps the testicles 2 to 3 degrees cooler from centigrade for optimal sperm production. So hot tubs and saunas while trying to conceive, not great. Showers are okay. Try and keep them cooler and shorter. Wearing loose-fitting underwear that are more natural, breathable fibers is important. Polyester underwear and polyester or synthetic pants on a, leather or synthetic chair sitting there all day, that's heat. That's going to cook your balls. Cotton, wool, bamboo, these breathe better. Try not to cross your legs too much, take breaks, get up. If you're sitting, or get a stand-up desk, walk around. If you're ever feverish, use a cold pack on your testicles to keep them cool. And there is some preliminary evidence. I don't know if it's really dependable, but there's definitely some products out there too, or some recommendations of just literally putting a cold pack on your testicles, on your scrotum, maybe for a period of time before bed each night, keeping things cool. But this in particular as well, I was referencing a fever from an illness. You want to keep that down, because a fever can kind of wipe all your sperm out if it gets too high. So if need be, you can lean into Tylenol or ibuprofen, which I don't recommend, period, because they have their own detrimental effects on sperm. Ejaculating regularly. This is something that maybe a lot of men don't have trouble with. I don't know. But even when you're not trying to conceive actively with your wife, ejaculation should occur regularly, like minimum probably once a week, to minimize free radical damage. So the analogy is to imagine cars in a tunnel with smoke and exhaust building up over time, the cars that are running. Sperm are a living creature. They take in energy and they give off exhaust as well. So this eventually creates a toxic environment, especially if your sperm is showed to have a lower morphology. There's going to be or a poor morphology. There's going to be more toxic exhaust. So keeping the cars in that tunnel, the sperm in ejaculatory ducts flowing is very important, particularly maybe for sperm DNA integrity. So ejaculate regularly. Avoiding radiation. Radiation in particular, I would say, would be, for the most part, for men, keeping your smartphone in your front pocket or your laptop on your lap. This is just damaging for sperm, not to mention, the ELFs maybe from power lines that are close by, or if you sleep right behind your fridge motor, or your Wi-Fi router is right next to you, or et cetera, et cetera. There should be more learnt about radiation and its impact on sperm, if you haven't already kind of wised up to that, and I'll put a link as well, all these in the show notes. Breathing and meditation, I think these are extremely powerful techniques to bring down stress, oxygenate the body, reduce high cortisol levels, because they affect testosterone levels. They increase sex hormone binding globulin, and SBGH, sex binding globulin hormone, and that reduces testosterone, that reduces sperm. So managing stress becomes imperative, if you're having difficulties making a baby. Dive in head first. Choose a few of the following recommendations to incorporate into your life every day, if you can, even 5 minutes. Meditation in particular, I've got another podcast, a video slideshow on it, Meditation 101 for fertility. It seems really hard to get into, but it doesn't have to be. Some of you may even have habits that are meditative, but and those should be, if that's your strength, you should be building on those, not trying to take on some new Zen practice, which can be difficult. So bottom line, practice is what will produce a more desired effect. I mix up different things from just contemplative time, staring out the window, quiet, actual seated practice, walks in nature that are just with myself and with the trees. They, 10 to 20 minutes a day, if you can get up to that even, it's going to be profound in its effect on your stress levels, performance, just your overall nervous system, blood circulation, and ultimately the health of you and your sperm. There's some recommendations in here. The Muse is a neat brainwave sensing tool. I love Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. I think he's a mindfulness expert, or I guess maybe the grandfather of bringing mindfulness practice out of Buddhist practices into the West, and I'm sorry if I don't quite have that as accurate as I should, but his meditations are fantastic, very basic. Headspace is another app. Meditations for male fertility, they're all out there, and breathing, the other. Daily practices of breathing are important. Oxygen is our number one source of cellular energy for our sperm, for every cell. So why not take a little extra in? And while you do that, nothing beats breathing for having a positive impact on our cardiovascular, in particular, heart rate variability. So lots of health benefits to getting a little deeper into a breathing practice. Something as simple as 4-7-8 breathing can be incorporated so simply, or box breathing, which is a Navy SEAL technique. Very, very simple techniques. The Wim Hof method is a little bit more involved, and it's a little bit more intense, and is often paired with cold exposure. So that's interesting for men dealing with fertility to explore as well. And there are people who teach Wim Hof method all over the world, but that's also, you can go to his website and get some basics there. Diet and nutrition, huge section. We are what we eat, I guess. We recommend, whole food, high fiber, low-ish, moderate carbohydrate, moderate protein, moderate to high fat, more of a Paleolithic style, 2 to 3 square meals a day, or if you're doing a little bit of intermittent fasting too, but trying to not snack between meals, reducing portions if necessary, and eliminating late night snacking is really what that means. So reducing your feeding windows. We recommend starting to compact your eating for sure within a 12-hour window every day, like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. There should be nothing after that. And tightening that even more so is probably very beneficial, especially if you're overweight. This also, when you get those little extra fasting windows, it helps your body optimize its use of fat for energy, not always just depending on these sugar dumps. It also gives our body a chance to cleanse, hit the reset button, increase stem cell production, give your body a break too from excessive metabolism and digestion. But these all vary. Please always, I have to reiterate, speaking to someone who can kind of dissect your individual circumstance and recommend individualized custom plans for you. So these are overall plans. These are some foods simply that have been shown maybe to optimize reproductive health and semen parameters. Beets for various reasons, fresh cooked powder, sprouts, oats, walnuts, pumpkin seeds, Brazil nuts, grapes with their seeds in particular, fish, the smaller the better, of course. Lots of very beneficial omega-3 oils in there. Surf and turf, there's a wide variety, but within this I want to emphasize the importance of sourcing good quality food, organic if possible, free range even better, knowing where they came from and that they were raised well is important for the health that I think that the food delivers to us. Lycopene-rich foods for sperm morphology, there's some good evidence there. Things like sun-dried tomatoes. Keratin-rich foods for sperm motility. Some research there on sweet potato. This would be carrots, things that are we know them to be keratin, more orange, but there's other things like kale and squashes and stuff that help there. Important for men, the pharmacokinetic function of Viagra would be connected to nitric oxide release, and that improves blood circulation and health of blood vessels in particular. And that's something we want to be always looking at and improving upon with men, especially if there's sexual function issues. But bottom line, even to just improve if you're improving blood circulation to your reproductive organs, you're improving nutrient delivery, oxygen delivery, and waste and toxin elimination. So in particular, focus on foods that are rich in nitrites like spinach. Beet is the key there. They can be converted into nitric oxide by combining them with adequate polyphenol intake, like from berries and dark chocolate and broccoli and nuts and capers and apples. This is important as well, even more important for those of you out there that have been diagnosed with cholesterol concerns, or have high cholesterol or lipoprotein a or various concerns with cardiovascular health. Understanding nitric oxide is basically a huge step toward understanding the health of your blood vessels, because cholesterol isn't always the villain. It comes to repair damaged blood vessels. So if we and weak and unhealthy blood vessels, so if we can keep them healthy, partially via nitric oxide, cholesterol is less likely to form clots. We need cholesterol. We don't always want to be beating it back. It produces sex hormones and is vital in many functions in the body. I suggest men that aren't eating a lot of beets supplement with beet and citrulline powders daily. Citrulline is also it's a powder extracted from watermelon. Very simple. It's an amino acid. Taken daily, it can be mixed into water. It's tasteless and good for 6 grams a day has shown for erectile dysfunction, 3 as a maintenance for nitric oxide. There's, from a traditional Chinese perspective, we look into reducing inflammation, and we call it maybe damp heat. A lot of men present with this traditional Chinese medicine pattern. I recommend, coming to me or going to another practitioner that is traditional Chinese medicine herbalist and look into what patterns you might be displaying, and in particular, if it is damp heat, it can be resolved really quite easily. And I've seen amazing success moving forward with men taking supplements traditional Chinese herbal medicine to help with this. But as far as diet's concerned, avoiding excessive spicy food, deep fried foods, eating on the go. Alcohol's terrible for damp heat. Dairy, especially if it's pasteurized, homogenized. A lot of sugar and sweet foods, excessive raw intake, eating too much. These are all things that can contribute to inflammation and the damp heat from a traditional Chinese medicine perspective. And remember, heat, number one enemy of our sperm, so we want to get rid of that. We already talked about fasting. We already talked a little bit about, sugar, but in particular, try to steer clear from white refined sugars. They're usually genetically modified and so hard on the system. Also, glucose, fructose are in the U.S. I think it's high fructose corn syrup. It's a Monsanto creation that is really difficult for our body to process and is probably partly responsible for some of the insulin resistance increases we're seeing today. Try and emphasize some dark leafy greens, eat good fat, eat local organic foods as much as possible, or at the very least try to avoid the dirty baker's dozen, it's called, foods that typically have a lot of pesticides sprayed on them. Sit down, enjoy your dinner, relax, chew your food. Try not to bring work to the table. Drink enough water, 1 to 2.5, 3 liters, depending on the amount of activity and how hot it might be outside, of quality water is important. I believe in reverse osmosis, or distillation is probably some of the only ways we can get completely clean water. Dehydration increases stress, cortisol levels, and can push down testosterone, and we've talked enough about that. So stay hydrated and try and simply, I think we all know, avoiding processed foods as much as possible. And on the topic of avoiding toxins in our environment, so many of them are known to disrupt hormonal balance and are linked to declining semen parameters in men all over the world. And these could also be potential causes of miscarriage, and et cetera, et cetera. In particular, phytoestrogens are known to increase sex hormone binding globulin, SHBG, which decreases free testosterone as well. So we want to avoid or completely eliminate, the use of things like wireless technology. If you haven't, for the radiation that it may be giving off, especially if you've got it in your pocket, it literally, our cell phones are work on microwave radiation. I know we all know what microwaves do to our food when it's concentrated. That's why your cell phone gets warm. It literally would basically cook things if it had a little bit more power. So it's doing it chronically at low levels. Just leaving your phone and things down or at home more if you can. If you haven't watched the documentary Social Dilemma, it's a good one. It will kind of open your eyes to a few things. Your Wi-Fi, your smart meters, we talked about this already. They all have impact on our sperm and may also be impacting pregnancy and the health of your offspring. So minimizing exposure to microwave radiations is important for both the man and the woman. Or if there is a man and a woman trying to conceive, or for the sperm, let's say, and for the woman carrying the pregnancy. Ibuprofen or any other NSAID, there's increasing evidence that it has negative impact on sperm. Processed meats, too much smoked meat, non-organic, animal products in particular be a good place to start organic. I've got, I counsel on soy and flaxseed, but for sure soy. I think excessive consumption of soy in particular, over and above everything else, it just has strong phytoestrogenic properties. So there can be some feminizing of men, if excessive soy intake is present, and that can impact sperm. Water that's been stored in plastic containers as well, maybe got hot, especially look for numbers 1 and 7 on the bottom, the little recycle triangle. Household or personal care products that have scent, fragrance, or perfumes. If something's under, usually last on the label, fragrance or perfume, it says at the bottom, that's where they hide, a lot of chemicals. So, laundry, body, hair, dish, household, all these soaps and things, cleaners we need to try and clean up. Dryer sheets, fabric softeners, terrible. Cannabis, it seems chronic use, more and more since legalization, at least in Canada, we're starting to see chronic use impacting sperm. So there's a lot of evidence to the interaction. We know there's interaction from the cannabinoids to the endocannabinoid system within the reproductive tract and the whole system. So bottom line, if you've been trying to conceive for a while, it's not happening, or your sperm is parameters are low or poor, you smoke or consume a lot of cannabis in one way, shape, or form or another, it's time to cut back or stop. Pop is terrible. Alcohol is terrible as well. It's poison. I mean, I'm not on a high horse. I partake sometimes, but I take at least half the year off every year. And if I had a goal like trying to conceive and improve my sperm, I for sure would consider that a time to cut it out. And not all alcohols are created equal. So if you're a wine drinker, look into biodynamic. The restrictions on what is put in is to that bottle that you're consuming is really quite strict. Otherwise, I know the FDA, I've heard numbers of upwards of 75, additives are allowed by the FDA into a bottle of wine without being labeled. You've never seen an ingredient label on a bottle of wine, I'm pretty sure. Tobacco, of course, microwaving food, especially in plastic containers we talked about, phthalates, some plastic exposure we talked about, and computers on our lap, etc. For men coming in, typically somewhere maybe in their 30s or 40s, that's usually when I see men. It's an opportunity, it's a window of opportunity in time that we maybe get to discuss health, period, with a man. And this is why I like it, the opportunity to discuss much more than just the sperm health with men, because like I said earlier, I want to try to create healthy dads, because once you have a child, you transform into a father, and everything changes. Your purpose waking up every day is clear, and you want to be healthy. You want to live long and strong, and you want to see grandchildren and graduations and all these things. It really does matter. So often men have by the time I see them, they've rarely seen physicians for much at all. So maybe they've got a semen analysis, and there is some evidence out there that poor semen parameters correlate to some future health concerns, testicular cancers, it's things like this. So it's a biomarker, and it's sometimes with patients I see the earliest biomarker that we ever get to see for a man. So if there's something not right with the sperm, we want to think about that. There's something not right, that's the bottom line. So to start digging, first looking into testosterone. That's kind of our hormone. So we are under its control a lot, from our mood to how we perform and how clear we think, and not unlike women have hormones that kind of govern. They're more on a cycle that we recognize, and testosterone doesn't have a cycle that we really know of, but it's responsible for sperm production and plays a key role in our overall health, particularly in sexual vitality and strength, just overall strength in men. So getting total testosterone, sex hormone binding globulin done, and free bioavailable testosterone done. A lipid panel, this is cholesterol, this is kind of cardiovascular health. Really in general, it's a lot easier for men, in a sense that what is good for our heart is good for our penis, is good for our athletic performance, is good for our cognitive. It's once you kind of boil things down, find out what's good for you, or what might be off, you're going to lead a healthier, longer, more vibrant life. So what's a lot of these recommendations that we're talking about being good for your reproductive system is going to be helping with your heart and overall health and cardiovascular health, period, as well. So get your cholesterol and triglycerides, these things checked. And also Metabolic panels, basically how your body deals with sugar, is also a huge contributor to cardiovascular health, weight management, more importantly, diabetes. Diabetes is quickly shooting. Diabetes is basically a disease of where our cell is becoming resistant to wanting to deal with so much, all the sugar that it's been given, and obesity is a piece, but there's a lot of downstream are very, very serious health effects that come from it. So we want to understand how our body's dealing with sugar and get that under control, because there's inflammation and all kinds of impacts that could be creating fertility concerns and just overall health and mortality. So HOMO-IR, hemoglobin A1C, those are two that should be looked at. And we've kind of beaten testosterone to a down, or we've beaten, I'm not going to use the term, but we've talked about testosterone a lot. It's the male sex hormone responsible for optimal sperm production, key in overall health and vitality in men. Low levels associated with decreased fertility, lower libido, erectile dysfunction, depression, low energy, inflammation, weight gain, just overall general crappy health, Low levels also increase chances of cardiovascular and metabolic disease, which we just talked about, as well as some cancers. So approximately 40% of men in their 40s present with low testosterone levels. So I've got another link to some basics of optimizing testosterone levels, but we've already gone through so many of them. So get to know testosterone more, get to know nitric oxide more, get to know a little bit more about you in particular through doing some testing, etc., and start implementing some of these other things that we talked about in the podcast, in the video here today. And finally, I want to recommend a book. If you haven't already read or heard of David Deida, I'm sorry, David, if I'm saying your name wrong, but this is something that changed my life many, many years ago. And I recommend it to men all the time. It's called The Way of the Superior Man, a spiritual guide to mastering the challenges of women, work, and sexual desire. It is an easy read, and it, I think, is essential for every man to learn about himself and to learn to dance with our estrogenic counterparts, the women and females in our lives that we're trying to start a family with. It's got some great tools to help us all understand ourselves and the women we're with better. So anyway, this is our Healthy Sperm Treatment Plan in a nutshell, in a 33 minute nutshell. Thanks for sticking around. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments. Otherwise, contact me if you would like to have a 30-minute consultation so we can dig into what you need in particular.